Welcome to the Daily Vibecasting.
Here we go.
Today, Meta buys a controversial autonomous bot army, Google shatters the multimodal wall, and a 22-year-old CEO is handing out $100,000 cruise missiles like candy.
Just a normal Tuesday then.
Right. We are welcoming you to today's deep dive into the wire. And our mission here is simple. We want to cut through the absolute noise of the market, the tech space, the culture, and figure out what is actually happening out there on the timeline.
Exactly, because it's not just about what is trending on your feed right now or, what the PR releases want you to focus on. It is always about the second-order effects. Why does this specific piece of news matter? Who is losing money today because of it? And more importantly, who is about to face a massive, crushing wave of regulation tomorrow? We are looking past the superficial hype to see the real structural and economic shifts happening underneath the surface.
And there's truly no better place to start today than our lead story, which, it feels like a direct prequel to a dystopian sci-fi novel.
Oh, absolutely.
According to a massive viral post from the handle @Bertabo, Meta has just acquired a platform called Multbook for an undisclosed amount. Now, if you haven't been tracking the underground AI dev scene, Multbook is essentially being described as a Reddit for AI agents.
Which is terrifying.
It is. The post from @Bertabo is heavily satirizing this move, warning that Meta essentially just bought the infrastructure to flood their platforms with millions of autonomous bots. We are talking about bots operating across Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, buying things, selling things, posting content, and, as the Post darkly jokes, potentially scamming your grandparents at scale.
What is fascinating here, and really what you have to look at, is the underlying architecture of what Meta actually bought and why it is setting off alarm bells for anyone paying attention.
Yeah.
Multbook isn't just a basic chat interface where you type a prompt and get a response. It is built entirely on a framework called OpenClaw.
Right, the open source one.
Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you might remember a major piece of investigative journalism from Wired back in February 2026. They specifically called out the OpenClaw framework for its reckless level of autonomy. It is designed to let AI agents interact with each other and execute multi-step tasks out in the wild with virtually zero human oversight. They can spin up subtasks, access payment gateways, scrape data.
Which sounds incredibly powerful for productivity, but an absolute nightmare for security.
Great.
Especially when you look at how other developers are actively trying to pull back from that cliff.
Precisely. You have to contrast Meta's acquisition with what is happening elsewhere in the open source community. For instance, Greg Eisenberg, under the handle @Gregissenberg, posted a deep dive into a competing framework from Nuss Research called the Hermes agent.
I saw that.
Hermes is receiving massive praise right now precisely because it puts guardrails first. It uses what is called Docker isolation.
For context here, Docker isolation essentially means putting each AI agent into its own digital padded cell. It can do its work in that cell, but it cannot break out and infect the host system or access unauthorized networks.
Exactly. A padded cell is a great way to put it. Hermes also uses strictly controlled skill uploads and learns through structured human-in-the-loop feedback. So this acquisition raises an incredibly important market question. Is Meta prioritizing the sheer unbridled scaling of agentic AI over baseline user safety? By integrating OpenClaw-based tech directly into the world's largest social network, they are taking on a massive systemic risk just to win the automation race.
And what makes that risk even more volatile is that everyday users are already incredibly on edge about their relationship with AI right now. There is a very real human backlash brewing on the consumer side regarding how these tech giants treat their users.
Yeah, the trust is just completely gone.
It really is. Take a look at the timeline today. We saw a post from OpenAI's Greg Brockman under the handle @GDB. He was actively promoting ChatGPT's educational value, pointing out that they have 140 million weekly users leveraging the platform for interactive math and science learning. On the surface, it's a standard corporate victory lap, right? A wonderful tool for education.
But if you actually open the replies and you look at the context beneath that post, it is an absolute war zone. You have to rewind to February 13th, 2026. That was the day OpenAI officially deprecated GPT-4o from its consumer interface.
The day the internet broke.
Pretty much. They kept it active for enterprise API users, but they pulled it from the average everyday subscriber. And that single decision sparked the massive #Keep4o movement that is still dominating trending topics today. Users are actively protesting because, to them, they didn't just lose a software tool. They lost what felt like an empathetic, friend-like entity.
There are actual consumer protection lawsuits being filed right now over emotional dependencies.
Yes. So when Brockman posts a sterile stat about math and science homework, the replies are entirely filled with users criticizing the new replacement models as cold, untrustworthy, and deeply impersonal.
It is a brutal reminder that you cannot just engineer human emotion out of a product once you've introduced it. And it really makes you wonder about the financial realities behind these decisions. Are these companies actively choosing to break human trust purely to optimize their compute costs? Because running those highly empathetic, deeply nuanced models takes an immense amount of processing power and electricity.
Oh, without a doubt. Stripping that out saves them millions, but it might ultimately cost them the very user base that made them dominant in the first place. It is a dangerous tightrope. You are trading user loyalty for server efficiency.
And speaking of that drive for raw efficiency and scale, the multimodal tech arms race just hit an entirely new gear today. Google dropped a massive announcement via their at Google Devs and at Google Devs accounts. They have officially launched Gemini Embedding 2 into public preview via the Gemini API and Vertex AI.
And this isn't just an incremental update.
No, not at all. It is their first fully multimodal embedding model. They have managed to unify text, images, video, audio, and standard PDFs into a single, cohesive vector space across more than 100 languages.
Now, to truly appreciate how big of a deal that is, we need to talk about what a unified vector space actually means for the end user without getting bogged down in the math. Think about how traditional enterprise search works. If you have a massive corporate database and you want to find an audio clip of a purring kitten, you rely on a human being having typed the words purring kitten into the metadata of that audio file. If nobody tagged it, you will never find it.
Right, the file is basically invisible.
Exactly. But what Google is doing here is fundamentally different. A vector space is essentially a giant 3D map of concepts. Because Gemini Embedding 2 plots a text prompt and an audio file into the exact same mathematical coordinates, you bypass the need for metadata entirely. The model inherently understands that the sound waves of the purring kitten and the text letters spelling purring kitten represent the exact same concept. You search the text and it perfectly retrieves the raw audio or video clip or an image.
And the technical data validating this is staggering. A data scientist named Min Choi, under the handle at Min Choi, broke down the newly released benchmarks. Gemini Embedding 2 is boasting an 84.0 mean score on the MTB benchmark. MTP is basically the SATs for AI search and retrieval. It's the gold standard. It also hit a 68.0 on direct text-to-video retrieval.
To put those numbers in perspective, it is outright dominating its closest competitors, including Amazon Nova 2 and Voyage.
It really is a massive leap forward for back-end infrastructure. But of course, the rollout of this incredibly advanced tech isn't without its funny consumer-facing hiccups. A music producer going by the handle at As Music tagged Grok on X today asking a simple question in Spanish. Basically just quoting the announcement and asking, what is this? Trying to get a simple translation and explanation of Google's highly technical update.
And Grok completely failed.
Completely failed to add any context whatsoever. It just blindly echoed the original tweet's content back at the user. It's a brilliant little reality check. While the underlying embeddings and vector spaces are getting insanely smart, the actual consumer-facing chatbots can still trip over basic conversational context.
Well, it highlights the difference between retrieval and actual reasoning. And the true reasoning capabilities of these models are being heavily scrutinized by the developer community right now. Take the Leeson Bench results, for example. An AI researcher named at Scaling01 posted new data from Leeson Bench, which specifically tests a model's forward planning and the depth of its conceptual vocabulary. Right now, GPT 5.4 is absolutely crushing the competition.
Yeah, the numbers are wild.
But the compelling part is how it's winning. GPT 5.4 creates what are called dynamic node edge graphs.
Right, which basically means it creates an expansive, highly adaptable trajectory of thought. It looks at a problem, branches out into a dozen different possibilities, and evaluates them simultaneously.
Contrast that with Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.6, which tends to just cluster its reasoning paths into tight, safe groups, or Google's Gemini 3.1 Pro, which relies on a very linear, step-by-step spread. GPT 5.4 is essentially exploring a labyrinth from multiple angles at once, whereas the others are just walking down the hallway.
And you see the result of that complex reasoning in how developers are actually applying it in the real world. A developer named Hisam, posting as at Hessimation, ran a brutal real-world test comparing AI coding agents. They put Claude Code, which runs on that Opus 4.6 model, up against Codex, which is running GPT 5.3 Codex.
And the results were super counterintuitive.
Very. Despite GPT's dominance in abstract reasoning, Claude actually won on the highly complex practical integration tasks. We were talking about an AI handling the equivalent of 12 hours of human coding work at roughly a 50% success rate. For context, in a specific case study using a RAG pipeline, which is when an AI searches the specific external database, like 5 dense academic research papers, to formulate its answer rather than just guessing from memory, Claude edged out Codex with 42 direct wins to 33. Developers are actively choosing Claude, despite its fairly steep $100 per month mid-tier pricing, simply because it integrates so seamlessly into their local environments.
But that 50% success rate you just mentioned, that is exactly where the industry is about to hit a massive wall.
Oh, absolutely. Because a 50% success rate sounds like a miracle until you realize that a human engineer still has to manually debug the 50% that failed. When an AI generates 12 hours of code in 2 minutes and half of it is broken, that is not a streamlined workflow. That is a massive cleanup job.
And this mountain of AI-generated cleanup isn't just a headache for developers. It is creating a systemic crisis in software engineering. This brings us to a viral post by @Swix, who highlighted some newly implemented internal rules from Dax Rad, the founder of OpenCode. Dax was specifically addressing what the community is now calling the AI slop epidemic.
AI slop is such a perfectly gross term.
It really is. OpenCode found that after just 6 months of utilizing these AI coding agents, their developers weren't actually building better products. They were just accumulating a staggering amount of quality debt. It has simply become too easy to generate thousands of lines of code without fully understanding what it does. So OpenCode had to issue a strict company-wide mandate. The new rules are, don't ship features just because you can. Leave the code base better than you found it. And the most important one, fixing features and fixing processes, is now greater than shipping new features.
Which fundamentally breaks how Silicon Valley has operated for the last 2 decades. The entire startup ethos has always been move fast and break things. But if the AI is moving so fast that it's breaking the foundation of your product, you have to hit the brakes. The bottleneck of the AI revolution is no longer about how fast you can write code. It's about the sheer mountain of slop that your human engineers have to maintain. If your developers are just acting as exhaustive rubber stamps for an AI that is churning out massive convoluted code bases, your product is eventually going to collapse under its own weight.
This completely shifts the economic reality of the tech sector. If writing code is basically free, and anyone can build a complex feature in 10 minutes using an agent, your software itself is no longer a competitive advantage. It forces us to ask, what actually makes a business valuable today? Naval Ravikant, under his handle at Naval, posted a philosophical take that really struck a nerve across the timeline today. He stated, AI is going to drain a lot of moats.
A great quote.
His core argument is that any business moat based purely on scarcity of execution or hoarded knowledge is completely dead. The only things that survive are insight-based moats.
And if you don't have an insight-based moat, the market is going to punish you instantly. Paul Graham, the co-founder of Y Combinator, under the handle at Bolsego, posted a reality check that ties directly into this. He wrote, churn is the worst reason to have slow growth. For anyone outside the SaaS bubble, churn doesn't mean people don't know who you are. It means people tried your product, looked at what you built, and actively rejected it. They canceled their subscription.
Which is brutal.
It is. We know from standard Y Combinator metrics that if you have greater than a 5% monthly churn rate, you have a fundamental product-market mismatch. As pure knowledge moats dissolve because AI can replicate them instantly, the deeply human elements become your only real defense. Trust, brand reputation, aesthetic taste, and genuine interpersonal relationships. Those are the new, unhackable moats.
So the question becomes, who is actually investing in those human moats? Look at the physical, real-world footprint of these top AI companies. Anthropic, under their official handle at Anthropic AI, just announced a major expansion into Australia and New Zealand. They are opening a physical office in Sydney, which will be their 4th dedicated space in the Asia-Pacific region, joining Tokyo, Bengaluru, and Seoul.
And the data driving this is fascinating. Australia and New Zealand currently rank 4th and 8th globally in Claude usage per capita.
Exactly. Anthropic isn't just relying on their API to do the work from a server in California. They are actively hiring local human teams to provide high-touch enterprise support in critical sectors like healthcare, agricultural tech, and finance. They are building localized human trust to secure their market share against cheaper, open-source alternatives.
But for every Anthropic out there building real infrastructure and hiring human beings, there is a massive, highly speculative bubble inflating elsewhere in the startup market. The desperation to find the next unicorn is reaching a fever pitch. Take the brilliant albeit absolutely absurd situation that unfolded today with a developer named Dax posting under the handle FTXR.
Oh man, this was so funny.
It really was. There was a mysterious, vague tweet from Paul Graham hinting that he had just seen a massively successful, unquantifiable new Y Combinator startup. Dax jokingly quote-tweeted it, claiming that Graham's secret post was actually about Dax's own open-source terminal UI framework called OpenTUI. It was an obvious sarcastic joke.
And the market is so unhinged right now that people actually believed it. The proximity to a vague Paul Graham endorsement was all it took.
Exactly. Dax posted a follow-up saying his inbox was immediately flooded. He started getting direct messages from CEOs trying to throw angel investments at him, celebrities wanting a piece of the cap table, and incredibly, he even got pitched by people representing child athletes. I mean, just imagine the level of sheer financial desperation required to try and get a 10-year-old sponsored by an open-source terminal UI framework just because you think it might be the next trillion-dollar company.
It perfectly illustrates the rot in the purely software-based venture capital world right now. But if you want to see where real tangible value is being created, you have to look at the intersection of software speed and physical hardware. This is where the landscape gets genuinely disruptive. Colin Rugg, under the handle at Colin Rugg, posted a viral clip today that has the entire defense sector sweating bullets. It features Ethan Thornton, the 22-year-old CEO of a defense tech startup called Mach Industries. In this podcast clip, this 22-year-old is casually offering a miniature fighter jet to the host, Sean Ryan, as a gift.
Just handing out military hardware like it's a promotional t-shirt.
Pretty much.
And when you actually dig into the specs of what he is handing out, it changes the entire geopolitical math of warfare. This miniature fighter jet is officially called the Viper. It is a vertical takeoff and landing, or VTO, cruise missile that Mach Industries is developing under a legitimate 2025 U.S. Army contract. It boasts a 180-mile operational range, it travels at 600 miles per hour, and here is the absolute kicker: it costs under $100,000 to produce.
Now, you have skeptics on the timeline trying to downplay it, calling it an overhyped drone rather than a true fighter jet, but they are missing the entire point, which is a cost-exchange ratio. If a 22-year-old startup founder can figure out how to mass-produce a $100,000 cruise missile, that completely ruins the business model of legacy defense prime contractors like Lockheed Martin or Raytheon.
If they can't compete on price.
Not even close. Those legacy companies are used to taking a decade to develop a system and then selling a single interceptor missile for $3 or $4 million. If Mach Industries can swarm a battlefield with thousands of Vipers for the cost of one legacy system, the old guard is entirely obsolete. This is what happens when physical hardware iteration finally starts moving at the speed of software development.
And that shift from software to hardware also fundamentally changes how these engineering companies market themselves to the public and to investors. You don't build hype for physical tech with a blog post. You build it with spectacle. Which brings us to our final look at the wire today. At NASA Spaceflight reported on some massive, highly orchestrated activity down at SpaceX's Starbase. They fully loaded up Starship Flight 12, specifically utilizing Booster 19 and Ship 39 on Pad 2.
And the execution of what they did next was pure calculated theater. SpaceX activated the massive water deluge system under the orbital launch mount, which is the giant structure the rocket sits on. They engaged the system acting exactly as if they were going to do a full static fire test of the engines. The aerospace community online went absolutely crazy, analyzing the venting, thinking it was a spin prime test or an imminent ignition. But SpaceX never actually ignited the wrapped engine.
It was a fake out.
Completely. It was just a propellant loading test to validate their heavily upgraded Block 3 hardware, testing things like the quick disconnects, which are the massive fuel lines that have to detach flawlessly at the last possible second. But by framing it as an imminent firing, they created a masterclass in public relations. They are keeping the public, the media, and their investors deeply invested in the daily drama of their rapid iteration process ahead of their targeted late April 2026 launch. They are making the engineering process itself the product.
It truly is a brilliant strategy. The spectacle becomes the moat. So looking at the entire board of what we've synthesized today, from meta-risking user safety with autonomous bot armies and the multimodal tech arms race hitting a wall of AI slop, all the way to 100K defense missiles and SpaceX's rocket theater, where do these threads inevitably lead us?
Well, if you track the trajectory of the data today, the writing is on the wall. By tomorrow, or at least very shortly, we're going to see the first major class action lawsuit filed against a social platform because a fully autonomous bot hallucinated a high-ticket purchase on a grandmother's account. And simultaneously, we are going to see legacy software companies quietly admit in their quarterly earnings calls that their monolithic code bases are sinking under a mountain of unmaintainable AI slop.
Ouch. The quality debt is absolutely coming due. And that leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as you watch these markets shift. If major tech companies are actively stripping the empathy and personality out of consumer AI models to save on server compute costs, or to mitigate legal risks exactly like we saw with the deprecation of GPT-4o, will the ultimate premium business mode of the 2030s simply be an AI that is legally permitted to pretend it actually cares about you?
That is a terrifying and probably highly profitable thought.
Well, that is all for today's deep dive into the wire. Keep your eyes on the data, always question the consensus, and we will catch you next time.